Welcome everyone. The time is now 12:30. Welcome to this important online event on the topic of transitioning to a green and socially just net zero homes in Europe. An event organized by Housing Europe, the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing. My name is Jonas Lindholm. I'm the managing director of the Danish think tank Monday Morning. I'll be moderating this event for the next hour. It's an event that takes place at a critical moment within the broader framework of the European Green Deal, notably the target of a 55% CO2 net reduction target by 2030, presented under the Fit for 55 package. The European Parliament has now started to discuss the proposal for a revised energy efficiency directive, a renewable energy directive, and an emissions trading scheme for buildings and transport. And the Commission will soon publish its proposal to revise the energy performance of buildings directive. All this will have a direct impact on the activities of social housing providers across Europe. So the question on the table during today's event is whether the EU is taking the right direction in terms of supporting the fair energy transition and decarbonization in the social housing sector. We will have 4 speakers during today's event. Bent Madsen, Managing Director of BL in Denmark and President of Housing Europe. He will bring the perspective of social housing providers and the main messages that the sector is conveying to policymakers. Signe Rømer is a senior analyst at Copenhagen Economics. She will present the key points of their recent report on the feasibility of energy requirements in the social housing sector. Stefan Moser, head of unit at DG Energy, European Commission, will bring the perspective of the Commission in relation to the Energy Performance and Building Directive. And Pernille Weiss, member of the European Parliament and shadow rapporteur of the proposed revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive, she will tell us what we can expect from the discussion in the Parliament about this important piece of legislation, also for social housing. Also, a warm welcome to all of our speakers, as well as a very warm welcome to our online participants. I would like to encourage engagement from all of you in the form of questions to our strong panel of speakers. Please type your questions in the chat box. And do remember, this is a discipline we've all gotten very used to, but please also remember to mute yourself during the entire event. Obviously, speakers will have to unmute yourself during your presentations. Let's get started. Our first speaker is Bent Madsen, President of Housing Europe. I believe, Ben, you'll be using a few slides for your presentation.
That's right.
The word is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Thank you for moderating us today, and welcome to everybody. On my first slide, I will have a little, I can't see any slides now, but maybe I can see them in a second or two, or everybody can see them. I will make a short presentation of Housing Europe, an umbrella organization with more than 25 million homes all over Europe, 25 countries, and maybe we will have the slides on the screen in a little moment. But when we look at our 43,000 member organizations, one of the key things is, of course, the social responsibility. But we also have in our sector a high degree of environmental responsibility. And one of the key messages here today is that we have to have the green ambition and the social ambition has to go hand in hand. And now I can see the slides, it's perfect. And what I will present for you in a few seconds is that the situation all over Europe, because the situation is very different. We agree on the goal of the green transition, but when we look at the different countries, you can see many different situations, and there are many roads to achieve the goal. This is also one of the key messages here today. If we can go to the next slide. And here you can see a housing company in Amsterdam digging in the ground. And what are they digging for? They have district heating there, the implementation of district heating in 110,000 homes in Amsterdam. And it's affordable homes with low and middle income, and they will not have an increase in their energy bill. But because of the district heating and the green district heating, they will have a reduction here in the CO2 emissions of 60%. So it's a high ambition, but with the same expenditures for the people living in the homes. And this is just one example here. We'll have district heatings on a broad basis also in Amsterdam. And there is a very high ambition in Amsterdam. When you reach 2040, it will be a city with no gas, no natural gas-free city, and clean energy city. It's a high ambition, and it can be achieved, and it can be achieved with the help of the social housing companies in Amsterdam. And if we go to the next slide, what you saw on the previous slide was some big housing companies transition in the whole city. It's one of the same things you're looking at here. We are going to Berlin, and what you can see here is they're not digging holes, they're using the roof. They're using the roof for solar panels. And what are they doing here? They are supplying the whole neighborhood with 70% of emission-free energy. So it's clean energy, 70% of the energy used in this housing area. And it's a housing area which has a social mix. There is low income dwellings there for pensioners and for young people, and subsidized homes, of course, and the other half is on market basis. So here you have a good social mix, and you also have a green solution in this district of Berlin. And also, there are many things in this project, also something about the drinking water. You're heating it when it comes out of the tap, so we are also reducing here the use of the energy. And now we will jump south in Europe. We're jumping, and we are going to Spain. Yeah. And here the situation is a little bit different because of the climate. Of course, we are not only talking about the green transition when you warm up your homes, also when you're cooling your homes. But another thing is that when you go to some of the northern countries in Europe, in the middle of Europe, you have 25% of social housing in, for instance, in Austria. In Spain, you have 1%, a little over 1% social housing in the Spanish context here. And there you can see solar panels, and you also have very low income families here in the Spanish context, and they need funding to have this transition to more green energy, because even before we had this peak in the energy prices, they were very close to energy poverty in the Spanish context. So it's really important to bear this in mind, that when we have this green transition, it has also to be a social fair transition in these countries. And when you look at in the Spanish context, it's also, you can say, with the low-income families, it's a very vulnerable sector here. And now we jump north in Europe to Estonia. And these building blocks, also a part of the history in Estonia. And it's not social rental, but it's a cooperative with a very social perspective, but it's also a kind of a home ownership. We can call it partly owned, but you can regard them as a home ownership, but in building blocks. And as you see here on the slides, the ECL, which is the organization in Estonia for social housing, They have made a transition of 1,000 homes to green energy and low energy use, but they need to have a transition of 14,000 more homes to achieve their goals in Estonia. And the situation is a little bit different. When we have this situation in Amsterdam, that big housing companies make a transition in a whole district and a transition of a whole city, a big part of a whole city. What you have here is that you have to convince single home ownership to invest in the energy transition. So the situation is totally different from the situation in Amsterdam. So on the one hand, you have to come with financial incentives to have people to make the transition on individual basis, and you also have to provide some ready solutions that they just can use in the different homes. So a very different situation from the situation in, for instance, Berlin or in Amsterdam. And then we can take the last slide, I think. One of the last, yes. What I said in the beginning was that we agree on the goal and the green transition, but you can see the situations all over Europe. They are very, very different. So there are many paths to come to the green. It's a very important message. Many paths to reach the green transition here. It's the shape of the housing stock. It's the organization in the individual housing companies. It's the share, 1%, a little over 1% in Spain, more than 25% in Austria. And are we looking at single homes as we did in Estonia, or a whole district as we do, for instance, in Amsterdam? So the situations in the different countries is very different. So to have a social fair transition to green energy and to reduce the energy in different countries, we have to follow very different paths. Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you, Bent, for conveying the perspective of the European social housing providers in regard to the sector's sort of pivotal role in delivering both climate-proof, resilient, and affordable homes, as well as the message to the upcoming European policy measures. I know, Ben, you will stay tuned throughout the session and also make yourself available for any questions, if so be later in the session. Our next speaker up is Signe Rømer, Managing Economist at Copenhagen Economics. Signe will summarize the recent study titled "Does One Size Fit All?" A study of the impact of minimum energy performance standards in the revision of the Energy Performance Building Directive, a study that has been commissioned by Housing Europe. Welcome, Signe. I believe you will also be showing a few slides. Over to you.
Thank you, Jonas. Yes, I would like to share some slides. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but yeah, let's try. I think here we are. Do you see well? A few nods would be helpful. Thank you. Good. So this is basically the front page of our report. Does one size fit all? As you said, Jonas, it's a report on the impact of minimum energy performance standards, so MEPS in short, in the revision of the Energy Performance Building Directive. So basically, what would be a good way to implement requirements for energy efficiency improvements in the housing stock. Just a brief introduction. I won't bore you with a lot, but just so you know sort of about the voice you're hearing and what kind of company we are. We're an economic consultancy. We're only economists. So you can imagine we have pretty boring parties. At the moment, we have no parties at all, of course. We have offices in Copenhagen, Brussels, Stockholm, Helsinki. We're around, I think, 90 people now, spread across these offices. And we work a lot in the climate energy green transformation agenda, also a lot in energy efficiency. And I reckon that was why Housing Europe asked us to do this report back in October. It's a fairly short, I would say, easy read, around 20 pages, so I urge you to have a look. Today I will just summarize really the key findings, and there's a lot more to be found in the report, so have a look. Our task was basically to look at what is the overall energy performance for the building stock as is, and what is then the potential for energy savings. Is it big? Is it small? I think Ben just sort of alluded to the fact that yes, there might be a potential, but certainly stuff is already going on. What are the key economic, social, and environmental factors that needs to be considered when implementing measures, say mandating energy performance standards or incentivizing energy efficiency improvements at a local, national, and even at an EU level, and which policy recommendations sort of falls out of that analysis. So I will, in about, I think, 10 minutes time, help you know 3 key findings. That there is indeed a large potential for energy savings and a lot of other benefits actually from renovating the EU building stock. But very importantly, that energy renovations do have sharply declining returns. And I'll get back to what that means. And then that there is a need for targeted measures. And I think also coming back to Ben's point from before, that these countries in the Union are definitely very, very different in a number of different characteristics. So let's dive into the first point on the potential. So we had a few stats before indicating the same, but the key takeaway here is that almost half of the buildings in the EU have an EPC label, that is a label indicating the energy performance of the home, below or at D. So that's fairly low. But also, as you can see on the right-hand side here on my slides, that this distribution is quite different across countries. So the countries in the top of this diagram have more, say, low energy performance buildings, and Netherlands, Slovakia towards the bottom generally have more buildings with higher EPC levels. We also know that the building stock in Europe is fairly old. Why is that interesting? Well, because you don't renovate typically very new homes. So older homes would be, say, coming up for renovations soon. So definitely also pointing to a potential. Also, we know that not a lot of so-called deep renovations take place every year. And only around 9% of energy savings in homes are actually caused by renovations. So definitely room for improvement. The benefits, on the other hand, very importantly, can also be significant. And this is not just about reducing the utility bill or preventing energy poverty. It can be a lot of other stuff. It can be, of course, key up on protecting the environment. That's of course important, but also enhancing quality of life, having a better ventilated home, less mold, whatnot. That should actually improve on your health, your ability to go to work, earn a living, and you know, for your kids to be fresh in the morning and going to school without a headache, and all of these more subtle things that can actually have collectively very, very large benefits. Jumping to the next point, which I think as an economist, this is hugely interesting and a key takeaway from this report, that energy renovations have sharply declining returns to a point where they do not pay for themselves anymore. So what does that mean? It means that when you when you conduct energy efficiency improvements to your home or your renovations, up to a certain level, these renovations are actually self-financing. So by improving your home, say changing the windows, you save sufficiently amounts on your utility bill that over a given period you would actually you know, get your money back up to a certain level of the EPC label standard. So we have more documentation to be found in the report, but I think these two diagrams are the funny ones. On Netherlands and Germany, we find that up to around EPC level B, you would actually have be able to do self-financing energy improvements in your home or in the building stock. After that point, the financial cost of increasing the EPC label by 1 unit is higher than the financial saving. So you save less on your energy bill than you spent to reduce the energy bill. So from an economic point of view, that's not sound, but also actually from an environmental point of view, you save less CO2 per invested euro when you move into the higher EPC labels. So you might actually be able to invest those money in other energy or CO2 saving activities that will get you a better return. So from a climate policy point of view, there might be other measures that are more effective and less costly. Also to be considered, very important, and this is sort of a collective slide because we have a lot of different points, I think, in the report, but that's too much for this forum today, for the time that I have allotted. So I just collectively produced this slide on a great deal of heterogeneity to account for across the EU, both north, south, east, west, but certainly also within countries. One point being on weather conditions. Certainly there is a at least from the outset, a larger need to heat your home in the north than in the south. But you might have obviously a bigger requirement for cooling in the south than you do in the north. But also the heating source or the energy sources might impact on your energy cost, really, because the access to fairly cheap renewable energy differs a lot across the EU. So taking into account the balance between different requirements for heating or cooling, but also the energy source is important. Also, the point on owner preferences that might differ, say an owner-occupied housing, you yourself will you will reap the benefits from your investment, while if this is a rental home, the owner will pay the investment, while the tenant will reap the benefits from a lower utility bill. And the question then on how much of this cost can actually be passed on to the tenant is of course important. But there might also be other local conditions. Can you get the renovation done because workers are scarce, or there are so many renovations going on in the economy that you can't actually get any carpenters out? That might be a consideration for, say, the timing of a renovation to take place. And there might be other points as well on policies and support schemes. Then turning more to the social housing sector specifically, there are different regulations impacting on this, as said before, the ability to pass on the cost of renovations to tenants. Affordability is a big issue here. Regulations are different across the countries, but also just bearing in mind that we would tend to have a high share of vulnerable tenants that won't be able to actually pay for these investments. So it's very important that, of course, they enjoy the benefits from a lower utility bill, but of course there will be a cost. And is that then the social housing sector taking on this investment again and again without actually being able to recoup the cost of that? That might, of course, impact on the ability to build new homes going forward and whatnot. Third key finding is then, as you might have guessed already, that there is a need for targeted measures. So basically saying that if you want to impose minimum efficient standards, MEPs, they can't be, there is no one size fits all. It's a very, very different union we have here with many different local conditions. So there needs to be a large degree of flexibility in the measures. The measures should allow for diverging preferences of the owner. Is it owner occupied housing? Are there tenants that might or might not be able to pay part of that investment? And then also that there are existing barriers to renovations today that should be taken into account when advocating for standards. I think that basically summarizes the report. Happy to take any questions if we have time later on, but Jonas, I'm sure you're in charge of that. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, thanks, Sina. Very interesting. Thanks for highlighting the key insights from your recent study on the impact of the minimum energy performance standards. A study that, if not already, will soon be available also on Housing Europe's website. And again, Sina, you will also be staying sort of tuned in to sort of provide answers on any questions that may come up. And you were spot on time, also sort of compliments to you for that. Our next speaker is Stefan Moser, head of unit at the DG for Energy, European Commission. Stefan is also in charge of the drafting of the Energy Performance Building Directive. I hope we have you online, Stefan.
Yes, I'm there, Jonas.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Jonas, Bent. Also, thank you very much, and Signe for this very interesting introduction and the insights which you offered. I'm very happy to be with you. Indeed, I fully agree that we need to find the right balance between flexibility, but also direction, and try to create as much added value as we can to promote good practices. Firstly, identifying good practices, but also then putting in motion the necessary means from the regulatory framework and the financing and technical assistance efforts which we are putting in place together. So it's a collective effort across the public authorities, including the Commission and the stakeholders, which is of absolute importance here, to create a framework which is fully shared, which is transparent, and also accepted by everyone. So we are now just in the final stages of preparing the draft Energy Performance of Buildings Directive revision for adoption next week. It's confirmed for Tuesday, probably presented on Wednesday. And the issues which Signe and Bent mentioned, we have taken very good note of them, in the sense of trying to propose the right balance within the legal draft. Of course, the basis will be the existing EPBD, and the EPBD is not the only instrument. It's also the Renewables Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, but also the Emissions Trading Scheme, and which play a role, and the Climate Social Fund, which plays a very important role, in particular for the socially just transition. We play a very high importance on the social fairness of making sure that what we need to do on the climate and energy side is fully buffered, accompanied, and reinforced by measures which ensure that also vulnerable citizens will benefit to the fullest. The focus, I may say that, and that was already announced in the renovation wave, will be on the worst performing buildings, which create multiple benefits in terms of climate and energy improvements, but also improving the living conditions and quality of life for the socially most vulnerable citizens. This will have to go hand in hand with basically massive support. And if we want to make a difference, really, if we want to set things in motion and have a transformational change for worst performing buildings, this will require massive support from European funding streams, but also national funding streams, to be seen together, therefore, with state aid, the state aid guidelines, which are also being revised. We think that what we have now, at least on good track for adoption, getting out of the Commission, is a balanced interplay between state aid rules revised in a very useful manner to go along with the regulatory environment and framework which we are going to propose. Of course, you haven't seen that yet. We are aware, of course, of leaks. Leaks are always, to some extent, I mean, we are not commenting on them. They sometimes occur, and the draft always evolves. So it's something which, of course, was the relevant draft at some point, but it has moved along quite significantly. The housing sector, as you know, is a very sensitive area in terms of subsidiarity and proportionality. We need to find the right balance between what the EU does in terms of EU added value and what member states have to take under their own responsibility, fitting in the overall ambition and what we need to achieve together. We have tried to find the right interplay there by focusing at the EU level with minimum energy performance standards on the worst performing buildings, but then having a very strong link to the national plans, which member states are to put in place as I would say, as reinforced successors of the long-term renovation strategies, as more operational plans with policies and measures really, and then also to take further forward the improvements of the entire building stock with a particular focus on the worst performing buildings. So it's something which you will see next week tries to do the trick here. And we are of course aware that there may be different views, different needs across the member states. So the specific circumstances need to be taken into account. And of course, we look very much forward to the further exchanges then during the legislative negotiations, where we will also listen very carefully to stakeholder views to see that it really works for everyone, to move upwards the overall performance significantly of the EU housing stock, but making sure that also the member state specific circumstances can be fully and most usefully reflected. So that is what I would like to mention at this point. Of course, I cannot go into detail as you will understand, but I'm very happy to also answer any questions which you may want to raise. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, I'd just like on my part just to relay that sort of encouragement for questions to the participants. And while participants may be typing a question or two for you, could you shed some light on the process ahead? So the launch is on Wednesday. Then what's the expectation in terms of the timeline from then on? Yeah.
So the adoption is scheduled for Tuesday, which is because it's a Strasbourg week. But as far as I know, the planning always changes. The press event will be rather on Wednesday, as the Commission often make sure that not everything is presented on the same day to avoid an overload by journalists. They need to be able to digest and to report properly. But the version should be known on Tuesday in terms of legal text. And then it will be basically Christmas, Christmas for digesting, for seeing in the different home constituencies what are possible views. And I think the negotiations will really start next year in terms of the presidency of the Council. France assures the presidency next year will then consider how to best take it forward with the member states. The same will happen in the European Parliament. And of course, we encourage very much that the entire stakeholder community, you as a particularly important association, but also other important players, develop their views. We are very grateful for your significant input, which we have received so far to the renovation wave, but also the public consultations on the various legal texts, not only the EPBD, but also the other texts linked to housing. But this will have to be specified now, because we have now a concrete text to basically express ourselves on and just see whether all the aspects have been properly considered. And of course, further suggestions can then be integrated in the legislative process through the European Parliament or the member states. And the Commission, of course, always can and will be a facilitator by also taking up ideas and trying to find a commonly agreeable version, which finally can then enter into force as a new legal text.
Thanks, Stefan. If I can put two questions to you, they're also in the chat box, but let me just read them out for you, and I'll give both of them to you so you can answer them in one go. So there's a question here whether there are any penalties sort of considered regarding the MEPs. That will be question one. Question two is, the ETS mentions upstream fuel suppliers as the ones that need to regulate the fuel they put on the market. Does this also include private housing companies or only energy companies? So one on penalties and one on regulation of fuel.
Thanks a lot, Jonas. Penalties, I would say, what is important is proper monitoring and ensuring the respect of the rules by the member states. So this will be something which the member states will have to take forward in their respective national frameworks. There's currently, that can be done and has been done on other occasions, but it's currently not in the text. There would be a kind of uniform, harmonized penalty framework proposed by the Commission, but rather each member state enforces and makes sure that rules are respected within their own national framework. So there will be, at this point at least, the possibility to have a kind of targeted and harmonious treatment of that within the legal framework of each member state. As regards the ETS, indeed, it's the upstream fuel suppliers, and these are the ones which are regulated. I think it's energy companies. Yeah. So in my understanding, I'm of course not in charge of the negotiations on the ETS, but as far as I understand the construction of the ETS and the intentions for the Commission, it's the energy companies which are the ones who take care of that as fuel suppliers, really.
Thank you, Stefan. Very useful. Thanks also for going slightly over time in order to give sort of comprehensive answers to these questions. Very helpful. We are now. I would now like to welcome our next speaker, our final guest speaker of today's event, which is Pernille Weiss, Member of Parliament. And part of the sort of EPP group. Pernille is also Shadow Rapporteur on the Energy Efficiency Directive. Also, many thanks to you, Pernille, in an extremely busy schedule to make yourself available for this online event. What we've heard so far from the perspective of Housing Europe is an ambition for the social housing providers in Europe to continue to play a really sort of pivotal role in contributing to reaching net zero housing, but also concern that the regulatory and financial measures proposed by the Commission may be very costly, and I really urge to not sort of apply very blunt and generalized instruments to drive through these important goals, but really try to adapt to different contexts and starting points. So Pernille, from the perspective of the European Parliament and in the context of the Energy Efficiency Directive, how should we best chart a way forward that is contextual and empowers all parts of society?
Thank you so much, Jonas, for this introduction, and also very complicated question, because for the 10 minutes that I have in the program, and also on the in respect to the context in this moment, it's difficult to cover all relevant aspects of what adds up to the result of the big equation of the green transition that will bring us to the reduction of at least 55% in 2030 and climate neutrality latest 2050. There are many directives that are now being revised, and we are just in the beginning of the work on every of these Fit for 55 files. There are also new directives, new instruments that are going to be developed from the start. And in between all these tools in the toolbox of the green transition, there also needs to be, of course, coherency, so that one instrument doesn't harm the other instrument. So it's like making not a triple, but a much more bigger domino of dominoes. So it also, therefore, many thanks for inviting me to this today's event and this talk. It's very, very timely, of course, and very, very relevant. Also seen in the aspects of that social housing is a big part of our society in all EU member states, but also that the social housing sector in every member state has its significant profiles. So we don't just talk about one typology that then in the way we do covers all complexities of all member states. But also in the current situation, we also face the energy pricings are rising. So therefore, we also have to deal with the new term in the society, namely the energy poverty. So what can we do to make the green transition in a way that do not push more negatively to the both perceived evidenced, but also the anxiety of facing energy poverty in the near future while we transport ourselves from the energy profile now that we have and to a more clean and green energy consumption of all sectors, and especially also how we heat and cool our housings. So that is very much on my mind and also of the mind of my group, the European People's Party, that we want to make this European Green Deal, the green transition, as the intended growth strategy, but also in a way that we don't leave anyone behind, and especially not those who we often relate to people living in social housing. So thank you for doing that. If I should come up with some reflections for the debate right now, I would like to underline also why I'm very happy that I was appointed as shadow for the Energy Efficiency Directive, is that energy efficiency in itself is the most cost-efficient solution to the green transition, which then can actually very precisely contribute to make better and greener social housings with also healthier indoor climate, safer outdoor environments, and cheaper energy bills. But still, the energy efficiency and the energy efficiency directive is not the most sexiest directive of all. I don't understand why. I mean, I come from the building sector. I come from a carpenter's family. So for me, and also I was born just before the oil crisis in the 70s. So for me, it's almost on my DNA that energy efficiency is something that we must do always. Also because in the times we are living in right now, the energy consumption is only going upwards because of the digitalization and the electrification of all society. So we need more energy that hopefully is both clean and green by the end of 2049, but also in a way that it's actually affordable for both normal families and normal SMEs. What I would like to put into this afternoon's talk is that I think that one of the solutions, not the only one, but one of the solutions to get the path right in social housing sector is to be, and that's so popular to say, that we have to be innovative. And I know that the social housing sector, and especially, of course, from my knowledge from my home country, is very innovative and curious of finding new ways of doing better housing and also of course in an affordable way. And that is by being innovative, by including the private sector. And I say that because that's actually also with reference to my country, Denmark, that, for example, pensions has been invested. Pension funds have invested in energy efficiency projects, and also we know them as the ESCO companies, where the savings of an energy bill pays the investment back, so that the tenants don't have a rent increase. So somehow you could say that energy efficiency projects is free of charge, and not only a good investment for the private companies, here the pension funds, but also for the tenants, because then the project will be paid back, and then after it has been paid back, the economy saved by the investment is actually something that comes into the benefits of the tenant. So I would very much like to also hear the other panelists and the audience view on this here, to how can we make energy efficiency investments and cooperation with the social housing typologies in the different EU countries more attractive. I think it's important to energy efficiency that we must make sure that that profitable renovations are carried out with respect for not always you can renovate. That's the second thing I would like to say, to the new building standards. I will not only work in the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive for this because of the climate, but also, and I said a little bit about that in the beginning, to make sure that social housing tenants get better and healthy and cheaper housing to live in without rent increases. And especially, I think we should underline the health aspect, because the current COVID pandemic have learned us a lot about what the physical environment where we live and also where we work, what high degree of impact it actually has to the risk of getting infected, but also how to recover after either COVID, but also other kinds of infections and viruses. So I think also the health benefits stemming from energy efficiency projects should be put higher on the agenda, as well as also, of course, the social and safe regarding aspects, which is also relevant for at least some of the portfolio of social housing. So when you cut down on the energy consumption by doing energy efficiency renovations of the building stock in the social housing, you also make living conditions for the tenants and their children much better. And we need that to keep Europe and EU strong and resilient, not only in health aspects, which is very important, but also as an economic aspect, because it's, by the end of the day, also can have a positive impact on our productivity. So there's many good reasons for why doing energy efficiency of the building stock, and especially in the social housing sector. And I look very much forward to hear your comments on my suggestion to put even more emphasis in how to get the private sector to engage and make the scale of the projects in the social housing facilities attractive for private sectors, either as funding, but also the companies who are first movers in energy efficiency technologies, that they could maybe actually be a part of an innovative circle testing new technologies to make their access to market even easier and quicker. We need that also, and that is where the social housing as a typology is a very important part of the ecosystem of energy efficiency sectors. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your comments and also the debate after this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pernille, for your reflection and intervention here. And while I would really urge sort of the participants to type a sort of response to Pernille's question regarding innovation and the private sector. There's a comment in the chat, Pernille. You may be able to see it. It's a bit long.
No, I can't. I'm actually using my iPhone because my hybrid is down and my iPad is new and now synchronizing. So I'm looking into my phone on the table. Sorry for that.
No worries. Technical questions are very common with all of us. So
you have to obey to
try
that.
and summarize it. I guess the comment here is that the sort of the proposed policy measure around an obligatory 3% annual renovation rate of public housing across the territory could prove itself very costly and very problematic for a number of countries, if I understand it right. How does that resonate with you?
I also hear these worries, and where I am at the moment, and I know that also my colleagues are, is that we are looking into the data to try to understand what are the starting points for the different typologies and the different countries, because energy efficiency and projects related to energy efficiency of the building stock, we have, of course, it must be a possibility, and I surely think it is, if we can activate the private sector and the fundings that are there, that we can actually make this a green transition without increasing the rent, and in the contrary, actually cutting down on the energy bill of a lot of families. So I don't see any contradiction on the pivotal level. But I do recognize that there are countries, such as also I heard from this panel here, that there are areas, regions in Spain who perceive themselves as being not able to start energy efficiency projects without external funding. And that is a part of what we are negotiating at the moment, is the social climate fund, but also the Next Generation EU fund and the development funds. EU has a lot of funds. So how can we actually use them in ways where we, if I can say it very bluntly, that it's not only a matter of giving some money to people that can actually not see that their homes are being renovated, or that their accessibility to affordable energy for their transport is actually being made a possibility for them. So the public funding for the green transition for families living in social housings, I think we should find out a ways how to give that in ways where it's actually improving the conditions to decrease the energy consumption in the future, instead of just paying the bills because of also, and that's a part of the delicacy, that there are national challenges related to poverty that is to some extent, and to maybe also to a high extent, not because of EU, but where what we can start if we do more energy efficiency is that we can create more jobs, that we can create also the upskilling and also to develop competences for people who are working right now in the black, so to speak, sector, moving with new competences to the more green industries and sectors, and hereby improving their personal income, thereby being able to pay whatever bills needs to be paid in a green future, where I also think we should be careful not promising everybody that something in their private economy has to change, maybe for good, or as a part of the transition. Hereby, and I would very much like to underline that, hereby not saying that I would allow some groups in our society to be left behind, because that is how evolution is. But I want us to reach out to those who are the most vulnerable in ways that don't keep them in the vulnerable situation. I want to use the green transition to upskill and to create more competences and build a stronger economy foundation under the families who live in social housings. I mean, that's the most sustainable and also most ethical way to make a better future.
Many thanks, Pernille. It's always, it's always a privilege to have an MEP on a call like this, and obviously there's a host of questions that are addressed at you. And if I can just put one to you and really urge you to try and be brief in your answer.
Yes, I will.
It's a question from Barry Linham regarding the sort of how to promote renovations that actually deliver the results that they forecast. It's a question that was addressed both to you and to Stefan. So essentially, how can we ensure that we use the right sort of incentives to actually deliver on the results?
Yeah, that's also a very relevant, but also a complex question to answer. When we worked previously for the Fit for 55 with reports and opinions for the upcoming revision of the energy performance of the Buildings Directive, is that we address that EU must deliver knowledge sharing and best practice sharing, but also we call it, and it's difficult, an easy term, the one-stop shops, where social housing as a typology, as an owners group, but also other typologies of the building stock can get help to analyze the building stock and assess whether and how to maybe make a deep renovation or a staged renovation, and also how to get the funding. And if we do that, then of course it's relevant to also put an effort in adding the kind of return on investment information, so that others can learn from what was done previously, that this was the analysis of the building stock, this was the conclusion of how to proceed with the renovation, this was how we funded it, and this is what we saved in energy consumption, but also how it had a positive, maybe also to be transparent, negative short-term, long-term consequences for the tenants or the building owners. So yes, that's actually a part of what we hope to build into the revision of the upcoming revision of the EPDB, being hopefully announced next week to start from New Year's on. As brief as possible. Thank you, Jonas.
Thanks, Pernille. Thanks for making yourself available. I know you've got a busy schedule. I need to sort of head on. Now we're 2 minutes from the conclusion of this important online event, and I would now like to hand over to Short Chair Edwards, Secretary General of Housing Europe, for concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Jonas, and thank you to all of the speakers. I think it has been an important part of the continued discussions that we need to have to get the legislation right. I will just conclude by referring back to Bent Madsen's introduction. What he showed was indeed that while the issues here are complex, the work is going on the ground. So he showed examples of varying different contexts, how different housing providers and local authorities are actually making this happen for citizens. They are managing to renovate at a district level at a high scale and deliver affordable homes that are future-proof and resilient. So I think this is what we have to keep in mind. This is happening on the ground, and the job here at European level, our task together with the European Parliament and the European Commission at this point, is to base ourselves on what is working on the ground and see how can we here at this level add value, to make sure the right funding is delivered, the right regulatory framework is there to make sure that this is actually multiplied so more people can get benefit from the Green Deal and we reach the CO2 targets.
Thanks, Sorja, for your concluding remarks on this event on the topic of ensuring a both green and a socially fair transition to net zero homes in Europe. Many thanks to our 4 speakers, Bent Madsen, Signe Rømer, Stefan Moser, Pernille Weiss, and to all participants. Apologies for not being able to bring forward questions from everyone. But this certainly shows the enthusiasm and the interest in this really critical topic. As a final piece of information from me, I should just mention that the study that we heard from Copenhagen Economics, as well as the policy statement from Housing Europe and other relevant materials, will be available on the webpage of Housing Europe after this call. And in general, that is a space to be watched for those of you really engaged in this important topic. With those words, once again, thanks to everyone for tuning in, for your questions and your engagement. The online event has now come to an end.
Thank you very much, Jonas, everyone.
Thank you.
Very interesting discussion.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.